Hey everyone, welcome back to the NerdNest. If you're new here, I'm Bill, and this is my channel all about the video game industry, and I've got 3 stories to share with you today, starting with some controversial changes being made over on Steam to Valve's return policies. After that, I want to warn you, I want to give you a warning about some Proton shenanigans. I just love to say shenanigans. And then I want to talk about game preservation and some news that sucks but isn't going to surprise anyone. But before we get started, I just wanted to do a quick thank you to everyone that has recently subscribed to the channel. My next milestone is 70,000, and I actually cannot believe that I'm saying that. If you've ever found my videos useful or interesting or entertaining and you want to see more of them, then click on subscribe and turn on the notifications, because I would absolutely love to hit 100,000 this year. All right, back to the news. Valve recently made a big change to Steam policies, and they added in what's called advanced access. This allows users who have pre-purchased a game to play that game before the release if they are entitled to do so via, the store, whatever it is that the store actually said. So, for example, a game is coming out on June 15th, and people who pre-order it or pay a certain amount, they can play it for 5 days early if you bought the upgraded version. That would mean that you would be able to play it on June 10th. Now, I am on record saying that I hate this practice. I personally say that if people can play the game on June 10th, then that's release day. June 10th is the release day. And all of the publishers that are doing this, they're essentially just delaying the game for people who don't want to pay extra. This has been something that publishers have been doing for a while. It's annoying. I hate it. But what has actually changed here? Well, Steam now will start counting the number of hours that you've played when you launch a game in advanced access. And what that does, it now counts towards your ability to return a game. More on that in a little bit. Overall, I feel like Steam has a fairly decent return policy. Essentially, you can return any game that you've bought on Steam as long as it hasn't been 2 weeks and you haven't played for more than 2 hours. There are a few more rules, but those are the big ones. So why is this change happening? Why is this a bad change? Well, I don't know if I want to say that it's necessarily a bad change, because honestly, it makes sense, but companies are going to abuse the hell out of this, and we really need to stop pre-ordering games. Here's why. I don't know when this practice started, but I've started noticing it more often recently. Game X is approaching launch. Reviewers get early access to that game so that they can have time to get through the main parts of the game and then tell people their thoughts on the game. This makes perfect sense. The reviews come out on the day of the release, or, if we're lucky, a couple of days before release. The game gets universal praise. Everybody's thinking, wow, this game's really fantastic. But then on launch day, there's a day 1 patch that adds in microtransaction hell that we're living in, because nearly every publisher is trying to find more ways to squeeze as much cash out of the players as they can. The reviewers didn't know about these microtransactions when they actually reviewed the game. They didn't know about it ahead of time. And in some cases, it may have actually reflected poorly on their review. So perhaps you decided to buy the game based on the reviews, and it's only a couple of extra bucks to start playing it now in advanced access. But what's actually going to happen is predictable as hell. You're playing the game, you're enjoying those first few hours, and then the game's real release day hits, and that day 1 patch puts in a bunch of pay-to-win mechanics. Previously, that 2-hour countdown didn't actually start until official launch day. Now, it starts as soon as you launch the game in advanced access. So you won't be able to return that game after the game unveils the cash shop that was sitting there waiting the whole time. This leads me to ask some questions. Number 1, what can Valve do about this? Number 2, what can reviewers do about this? And number 3, what can we do about this? Let's start with the first one. What can Valve do about this? Is it their fault? And I don't think it's their fault. Is there anything that they can do about it? I mean, I guess they could say it's our store, and if you want to be on our store, then you can't have advanced access, but that's happening everywhere in the industry. So I really don't think that that's a solution that makes a lot of sense, because Valve would end up losing sales and they would lose money that way. And even though I don't like what Valve did here, logically, I can't really find fault with the reasons that they're doing it, because if I'm playing the game, I should be able to make a determination in a couple of hours if I'm actually going to enjoy this game or not. It isn't Valve's fault that publishers are going to do this rug pull ahead of time. And what I do think that Valve could do was actually suggested by Twitter user Senior Raiden, hopefully I said that right. They said to reset the return window whenever a game makes changes to monetization structure. So if I've paid for advanced access, I've played the game for like 10 hours in that first 5 days of advanced access, but then the cash shop shows up and I'm not happy with it, my return window starts over the next time that I launch that game. Of course, this could be abused. I mean, okay, it would be abused by end users, because what people would end up doing is they would buy the game in early access, they would play a bunch, and then return it after the actual launch. I can understand why Valve wouldn't allow that to happen, and I can understand why publishers would stop Valve from doing that. All right, question number 2. What can reviewers do about this? Because they can't really control what publishers are going to hide from them. And the terms of the embargoes that they agree to are set for review outlets by the publisher, not the other way around. So some might say that reviewers could just refuse to review a game. And sure, they could do that, but unless every reviewer refuses to review a game, and all that would happen is that particular reviewer or outlet is going to miss out on clicks, and then the people who work at that company would end up losing jobs because the company isn't making the money that they need to make. I've seen some people suggest that reviewers go back and append their review after the fact, and while that makes a lot of sense logically, a lot of time, by the time that a game has come out, the reviewers moved on to the next game. And, I don't know if they have time to go back and see how the cash shop has actually affected gameplay. There are only so many hours in the day, and there are tons of games out there. I feel like reviewers don't really have much that they can do about this either. Question number 3. What can we do about this? And honestly, you're going to hate this. I don't think there's much that we can do about it. I mean, we could say we're just not going to support by not buying these games, vote with your wallet and all that stuff. But the honest truth is that there's just so many people out there that don't care about cash shops. They don't care about advanced access. They don't care about the other things that many of us can't stand. They just buy the games and then they play the games and they're happy. And honestly, I'm more than willing to bet that there are way more people that are like those people that I just described than there are people like us who want to put a line in the sand and say, this is how far you can go and you can't go any further than that. And even if everybody that did hate this kind of shady business practices boycotted every game that did it, here's what would happen. Well, number 1, we wouldn't have any games to play because all of the big publishers are doing it. Number 2, the sales of these games, I got to be honest, I don't think that they would be impacted even a little. And the big publishers, they know this, which is why they're pushing this. It works. They're making more money because of it. If it didn't work, they wouldn't do it. If we really voted with our wallets like we say that we will, then they would actually pay attention. But what actually happens is people get fired up and they scream for a boycott, and then they buy the game anyway because video games are fun and we want to have the fun. We want to be part of the zeitgeist. We want to talk about these games when everybody else is talking about them. Anyway, moving on. I wanted to warn everybody about this fake Proton GE website. I found out about this thanks to a post over at Gaming on Linux. Hey, Liam. I obviously won't be linking to this, but I will link to the real Proton GE GitHub down below. Real quick, let me explain Proton for those that don't know. And if you're one of those that do know, then let me know in the comments section if I got anything wrong. But the simple version is that the Steam Deck runs Linux. Most games, they're not made for Linux. So Valve partnered with Code Weavers in order to release Proton, which is a translation layer that translates Windows API calls to Linux API calls. Essentially, it lets you run Windows games on Linux, and it works unbelievably well. However, because sometimes there are things that Valve either can't or won't include in Proton or Proton Experimental yet, for whatever reason, Proton GE usually gets patched a little bit faster. So if you've ever run into a compatibility issue with Proton, you can install Proton GE in order to try different versions of Proton. For the most part, you don't really need to do this, but sometimes some games can benefit from using a different Proton version. How did I do? I'm sure I got part of it wrong, and if I did, educate us. If I got it all right, then tell me what your favorite game is right now. Anyway, installing Proton is stupidly easy. Number one, don't go to a website other than the one that I'm linking below, or if you don't want to go to a website at all, then do what I do. You can avoid using a website altogether. The way that I get Proton GE on my Steam Deck is I boot it in desktop mode, I open the Discover Store, I search for Proton Up Qt, I install that, then I get the latest build of Proton GE from there. Then I boot back into gaming mode, and if I need Proton GE for a game, then I have it. Though, I gotta be honest, I haven't really needed Proton GE in months and months, if maybe even since I got the Steam Deck OLED. I haven't really needed one, and it doesn't have anything to do with the OLED Steam Deck. I think that Proton's just getting really, really good. Game preservation. This is a big topic for me. I understand that I'm kind of a weirdo because I don't care about getting physical media for me, but I do care a lot about, preservation of video games. And so whenever publishers put out physical media, I'm always excited about that because I want other people to be able to buy these things and preserve them. But as a primarily digital gamer, I also recognize that at any time, our libraries can be removed and games can and have vanished in the past. This has been a hot topic on the podcast in recent days. By the way, did you guys know that I have a podcast? It's called the NerdNest Podcast. And if all of you subscribe to it in your favorite podcasting app, that would be huge. Back to game preservation. The ESA posted recently that they won't support the idea of having libraries preserve games. And while this sucks, it is certainly not surprising. The ESA, which is the Electronic Software Association, it's not a group that's here to defend end users' digital rights. The ESA is there to help gaming companies make money. And if you can't play your old games, well, then you'll have to buy new games, and so they would make more money. So what we actually need is an organization like, say, the Electronic Frontier Foundation or the EFF, for example, to sue the ESA. That way we can get a judicial ruling that forces these companies to stop killing our games, which is why I'm such a fan of what we've been seeing over at StopKillingGames.com. If the companies that keep doing this kind of thing face repercussions for their bad behavior, then perhaps that bad behavior would stop. For example, in Australia, the ACCC forced Valve to offer refunds on Steam. And as a result, Valve ended up offering them worldwide because it's just easier to do things worldwide and have one set of policies than to have different policies based on which region you're in. What I would love to see is for games that have online components that need to be preserved to be required by law to provide the end users with the ability to make private servers before removing official servers from existence. I do think that there's a less than 0% chance that this kind of thing would happen without some kind of legal requirement, but that's what I really hope for. But what do you think? Let me know in the comment section down below that like button. Well, actually, somebody told me recently that YouTube has redesigned stuff, so it's on the side now. Mine still looks the same. Anyway, sorry, I got distracted. From the Nerd Nest, I'm Bill. Stay rad, everybody, and check out this video right here. Bye.